Banned from LinkedIn. Banned from Facebook. Now broadcasting from the jungles of South America. Find out everything they don't want you to know. This is Biz Unwritten.
And then you come into this question about, well, if nobody owns anything at birth, how do we square that with layered rights?
It's Cowboy and Tim back for episode 20. As you can see, we're trying to make this more bite-sized for you guys because, frankly speaking, none of us got a lot of time. And so this is important stuff so that you can get information and get it quick. And we got a neat one for you today. So, Tim, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, so today we're going to talk about land rights. And I think the biggest thing being a Canadian right now in the news is there's big land rights news in British Columbia, a province in Western Canada. The BC Supreme Court has recognized Aboriginal title for Akowichan tribes over parts of Richmond, which is a city just south of Vancouver. It really sparks questions about how private titles coexist with Indigenous title.
So
now,
someone's going to come in, take your ex-wife's house that you've been paying for, get her jacuzzi and eat her dog, right?
That's so the thing right now is there's a lot of people scrambling. I've had multiple people message me and, they're saying, hey, what the heck's going on here? Somebody's going to take my house. I don't think it's a little bit overdone. Cities are holding town halls and homeowners are obviously anxious. So if you got an ex-wife in Richmond, no, they're not going to come take the house just yet.
You just didn't think it was really nice teepee or something?
Well, Richmond, I don't know how much I want to go into it, but Richmond is actually known for having a large Asian population.
Oh, so they do eat your dog.
So when I was living in Vancouver, it's fun. They have a Richmond night market, and I lived in Vancouver for a couple of years, and you would go down to Richmond and you would even see some restaurants that just have signs in Chinese language because they're trying to. So I'm like, oh, I want to get the best Chinese food, and sometimes I look at the menu and I'm just trying to talk to the guy, like, just give me whatever. We're very multicultural in Canada. That's what we stand for. That is our culture. But today I think we want to talk about, does recognizing this collective ancestral rights create certainty or create a moving target? So just a little backdrop from a philosophical standpoint, right? I really believe in the whole tabula rasa concept, right? Where, I was trained this from a younger age. When you're born, Tim, you don't owe anything to the world, but the world owes you nothing. And that's more of a philosophical thing about not being, this is mine because my ancestors were here. You know what I mean? And then you come into this question about, well, if nobody owns anything at birth, how do we square that with layered rights? Like, I could still be pissed off about the people that killed Jesus how long ago, but I'm born and that's thousands of years ago. So I think that's kind of what we want to talk about today. I don't know if you have any take on that, but I think your take might be, well, the law isn't a blank slate.
No, I mean, it absolutely isn't. I mean, in America, you buy something, you build on it, you get title insurance to keep some Indian from saying, hey, my grandfather died on that land, it's mine. And then, of course, they ended up on reservations, the ones of them that were still alive. But it even goes so far back as to say, these people are black, we used to have slaves, so now there needs to be a new tax against white people so that the money goes to blacks, because it's conceivable that the people in their family were once slaves, and we need to repay it back. I mean, this can go on forever. And then, of course, down here in Ecuador, we've got laws, and it's even in the Constitution, where Mother Nature gets the rights of a human being. Nobody owns it. However, you can still go and settle that land, much like the old Western frontiers in the United States. You can go and settle that land, make it your homestead. And if indeed you've been there for at least 10 years, and you can show you've been there and you've been working the land, then you can go and file for the rights for that land. But this has led to many different problems, because the Indigenous here, they don't necessarily consider themselves Ecuadorian or Colombian or Brazilian or anything else. Amazon's all over the damn continent. But they catch somebody, Ecuador sells land rights to China for mining and sells land rights to Exxon for oil exploration, and then they're wondering why they're getting shot in the ass by indigenous people who are going, why the hell are you in my backyard? Hey team, it's Cowboy here. If you like the content that you're seeing on Biz Unlearned, Tim and I have got a success team over on projectvictories.com, and you can get even more information there and even ask questions live or email questions in, and we can answer them. Maybe you'll even be a topic for a podcast or a guest, and you can get started for only $1. So why don't you let us know? Because there's a lot of people that took advantage of this, including the Deputy Director of IT for the United Nations, who was not the Deputy Director of IT for the United Nations when he came to me. So we can help you out. So why don't you drop by and see it and let us know. Now, on with the podcast.
Yeah, I think one of the big things, this is a problem we see globally. There's nothing wrong, in my opinion, about recognizing ancestral or collective rights, but I do believe that it's creating more of a moving target. It's a good discussion to have. We should support this discussion. One of the things I always like to look back on against the tabula rasa kind of movement is there are laws, there are private title, there is public recognition. How does that work with collective rights? And so I don't know if a lot of the viewers know how it works down here in Ecuador. I think it's not similar to Canada or the US. It goes back into Spanish law of escriture. And some people toss around the language of squatter law. But even in Ecuador, like you said, there is peaceful possession after a certain period of time. So it's not like some guy's squatting on your land for a couple of years. It has to be, I think, 10 years or longer that you can show formal evidence that this person was there. This was not on the plan of this podcast, but I see it all the time on social media, and I refrain from even thinking about what's right and what's wrong. Have you seen the videos? Again, I don't know how true they are. I'm a Canadian, spent a lot of time globally about is it rental laws in LA or in Seattle where somebody would forge or make a fraudulent claim that they're renting something, and then they go in there and then the cops can't kick them out. Have you seen anything like that? I guess that's kind of...
No. What I've seen, and I can speak to Texas, this has gotten a lot of my buddies in trouble. He let some crazy fucking hoe come in and live with him for a couple of months, and then he can't get rid of her because she's gotten mail there, and so
right.
The cops go, no, this is her house. She's lived here. And then she goes and takes out a protective order, and he gets kicked out of his own house.
That's the same thing in common law up in Canada. That's something interesting to think about. Originally, we were talking about land possession, but now we're talking about being in a common law relationship with somebody.
But they kind of went hand in hand, because the whole reason for common law was they settled this land in an area of the country where there was no preacher at the time. They went out and announced themselves as husband and wife, and then when the preacher came by, they got officially married. But that was where common law began, because they were out settling developments that didn't even really have a town yet.
Yeah, these land rights arguments and even common law, I think it's evolving. I think there's a big, I don't know if there's a trend, but I think there is a trend, and less marriages probably happening in Canada over time, slowly declining. So then it becomes a change as laws change and relationships change. How does that actually kind of work into coexistence rights? So
sure.
I think that's probably...
But the ability to will something to somebody, a piece of land, whether that land has minimal rights or not. So this is definitely a Biz Unlearned concept here, because if you're not taking into consideration the whole land situation, and your business is based on a land occupation thing, that's huge. I mean, oil and gas has got land leasing situations and all kinds of stuff. You got the oil man, but you also had the land man who's trying to find the place to actually drill, that type of thing. And so all of these things are huge, and it may not be your land.
Yeah, that is definitely even a more complicated topic. Growing up in oil and gas, and negotiations and having third-party arbitrage situations can happen. So it's interesting. Well, let's do this. I like the short clip here. Maybe what we should do, just as this is more of an intro podcast, what we're going to do is we're going to find a lawyer, whether that be up in Canada or whether that be down here in Ecuador, or let's talk about both. And let's see if we can get them on the pod here to discuss the two different perspectives. Because I think one of the big things about learning we're always chasing perfection, but what is the perfect way of setting up these collective ancestral rights? And I think even in Canada, we should be looking to other countries on how they're doing it, and just cherry picking the best laws and getting rid of the worst ones to kind of evolve over time. So if anybody lawyer watching, comment down below, and we want to know your comments and your opinions on this. And if you want to be a guest, maybe we should have a follow-up on this video.
And this is Cowboy and Tim coming at you again this week. Remember to like, comment, and share. Hit the subscribe button as you see one, and let's get her done this week.
Remember to like, comment, share, and hit the subscribe button. That helps us grow our channel, which helps us get larger guests.